Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. Noam Chomsky, Syntactic Structures. I am Snow, and welcome to the Cyberforest Speaks, where the roots and the circuitry are one, online at snowthegoth.com. In this episode, I want to talk about terminology, definitions, and words. Anyone, even peripherally involved with paganism, the occult, the esoteric, or adjacent matters, will have, at one point or another, sat musing over labels, titles, and terms. What is a witch? What is a druid? What is a heathen? What is a pagan? What is Cometicism, Hellenism, Thelema, Wicca, Geomancy, Necromancy, Scrying? Some sense of the meaning of these terms is fairly widely shared, academically set, and you could find in a dictionary, on Wiktionary, or on Wikipedia. An idea of the meaning of these words is important to ensure that in a given context people have a shared foundation. Everyone in a given group, looking at a book or what have you, understands to some degree or another what exactly it is they're getting into and what everyone else there is proclaiming to be into. Where variance to the dictionary definition may occur, they make that clear up front, so people can understand that and adjust accordingly, or decide it's not for them and walk away before losing anything in terms of time or resources invested. The heathenry groups I'm part of, for example, largely lean away from defining heathenry simply in terms of which gods are being worshipped, and define it more in terms of the whys and hows than the whos and whats. To quote the Longship's definition of a heathen is considered someone who possesses a worldview aligned with the cosmological concepts of the well and the tree, and accepts Weird and Oleg as cosmic forces, engages in the gift cycle through reciprocity with appropriate divine figures, the gods, the ancestors, and the rites, and is animistic, polytheistic, and/or panentheistic. It is a common modern misconception that pre-Christian peoples all over the world strictly adhered to pantheons based on their native cultures. In reality, ancient peoples exchanged religious beliefs, customs, and gods as easily as they exchanged goods, currency, and ideas. Therefore, not only is it difficult to draw boundaries between different pre-Christian Germanic peoples, cultures, and religious practices, it is not recommended. Now this differs from the idea elsewhere that heathenry is synonymous with Norse paganism and simply means either reenacting the practices of the Norse or worshipping the deities attested to in the extant Norse writings. Having this laid out for people to see and consider means that the terminology and differences in meanings of words from other spaces is understood from the get-go. This also brings us to the idea of labels. Now, whilst often debated, I do think labels are very useful and important. Whilst we might all long for an enlightened, wise world in which things can all just be, labels provide a convenient, good, useful shorthand for things to get across a lot of information in a few words. Obviously, this can run the risk of carrying existing misconceptions without clarification or dispelling them, but they provide an invitation to draw people in who may be curious or interested, and then the onus is on those involved to dive deeper into more specific and lengthier conversations around meanings and applications. Imagine walking into a record shop and seeing that rather than have sections roughly according to genre, they simply put everything together in roughly alphabetical order of the artist across the room. Whilst that may make for an exciting adventure, it would also be very overwhelming and time-consuming. It does little to help you find similar things to what you know you like already or are already exploring, and it does a little to get across an idea of what you might be looking at prior to diving in. The adage goes, don't judge a book by its cover. But to an extent, this is why books are grouped by genres in bookshops, and what blurbs are for. Labels and overly specific definitions do run the risk of becoming hard limitations, solidified boxes, and railroading people. This is why terms like magic, mysticism, witchcraft, druidry are so contextual. It's why books like Richard Jones' A History of Mysticism and Otto and Stausberg's Defining Magic a Reader talk so much of these terms being contextual to culture, time, and place, and how trying to find a universal definition of words like magic or mysticism is futile at best, and problematic at worst. Now, In the notes on the page for this episode, I shall link to a post I did on my site on mysticism, defining mysticism, practicing mysticism, and such. I shall also link to a talk by Drs. Dana Trell and Justin Sledge on perennialism. But a key takeaway, one of many, from these is that definitions are contextual, and trying for a universal definition that covers every instance of something across all cultures, all regions, and all eras of humanity is a waste of time, because it just won't work. Now, does this mean trying to define terms is entirely pointless? Not at all. It simply means that whilst it is helpful to have an idea of the commonly used dictionary definitions of words or their academic definitions, where meaning differs, we consider the context of their usage and explain as we go. Consider necromancy. By technicality, necromancy would be some form of divination involving the dead, but necromancers and death workers, such as Mortellus, take much broader definitions and discuss anything involving the dead, from talking to deceased relatives to considering the beings that died for us to have oil and plastic to come under a broader understanding of necromancy. Or take Hermeticism. For much of the early modern Western world, this term was used synonymously with esoteric, occult, magical, and the like, but recent scholarship has led to people such as Polyphanes of the Digital Ambler to talk more specifically in terms of Hermeticism relating to the ancient Greco-Egyptian mystical religious framework, and practices relating to the ancient texts, such as the Corpus Hermeticum, the Asclepius, and the Stebaean fragments. Knowing these differences helps when you engage further with a topic, a group, or a practice, but from the outside, how necessary is it to know this differentiation? It is also entirely possible, and not uncommon in the wider world, for words to change their meaning over time in popular consciousness. Semantic shifts do occur, and at times there is resistance to this as people take a more prescriptive approach, and at other times people let the world do what it will, and continue to specify what they mean in their own individual or group works. Words such as queer, for example, have met strange, or been a slur, or been an empowering label for anyone who is LGBT+, depending on the era and the location. Or for a more obvious example, take the word cult. In its origins, cult meant a system of religious worship relating to the idea of tending to, taking care of, and cultivating. This is an active endeavor rather than passive adoration, and is aimed at or connected to deities, spirits, and ancestors. And in academic works relating to ancient or early medieval religions, it still does. But in the modern wider world, cult conjures up images of Charlie Manson, abusive groups, and manipulative leaders. These are both correct, but their meaning is contextual. Words may become problematic when trying to articulate experiences, the ineffable, and things we experience through other senses and ways simply than academic knowledge. We have many different kinds of knowledge. To use some Greek terms here, we have what we're taught, episteme, what we can reason, logos, what we believe, pistis, and what we experience, gnosis. Even some of these mean different things in different contexts. Genesis 1:1 states that in the beginning was the Logos. Different ancient Greek or Hellenistic philosophical schools used Logos to also refer to the cosmos and divinity itself. But words, no matter how tricky, mean things, and are both useful and important for the world we live in, how we communicate, and how we function. If you come across a word and don't know what it means, you look it up, and if that doesn't seem to help with the context you're seeing it used in, ask. As an old acquaintance said, it's better to risk looking silly for 10 seconds as you admit to not knowing something and ask, than to look silly for the rest of your life, hiding behind ignorance or naivety, doing things incorrectly or avoiding them. Anyone who won't take a second to explain things to you either doesn't know themselves or isn't worth hanging out with more. We are more than a given label. Words change, evolve, and grow as the people using them do. If the users of words are multi-layered and multifaceted and highly contextual, why would words not also be, especially when used to try to describe experiential or ineffable things such as magic, the mystical, or the divine? Next time, I want to discuss what I mean by Gothic heathenry, how it might differ from your idea of heathenry or the forms of heathenry, and what I mean by saying I am a Gothic heathen. Until then. All I ever wanted, all I ever needed, is here in my arms. Words are very unnecessary. They can only do harm.